Hi, so my name is Anthony Ruth, and this is going to be my film review on the movie Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese. So, going into this film, I had seen a couple trailers, and I kind of knew what the premise was, but I did not want to learn any more than what I had seen because I wanted the movie to tell me the information for the first time, because I knew I was going to eventually research it, look at pictures of the actual people, and maybe read what was fantasized, or true and not true from the movie. But going in, I just wanted to see it completely blind. So this movie stars Leonardo DiCaprio, Brendan Fraser, Robert De Niro, Lily Gladstone, Jesse Plemons, a whole big cast. And I gotta say that that's one of the main positives of this movie is the acting, because the performances are very natural and these actors are all on a level to where they aren't overshadowing each other, but they just play in the scene with each other so well that there's not one person outshining the other, unless they're necessarily the person who's like in charge of the scene, as in they're the one leading, trying to get what they want. Like, for example, Robert De Niro's character, he's a very, very manipulative man. So there are times where he is kind of in charge of what's going on because he's like leading. But at the same time, he's not overshadowing Leonardo DiCaprio. Or for Leonardo DiCaprio, he's not overshadowing Robert De Niro or Lily Gladstone. Everybody just meshes with the film so well. And you get this feeling that they just bought into the story and they're committed to telling this true story to the best of their abilities, and that that just comes off with extreme artistic integrity that I really appreciated. So their performances were great, especially I gotta say Robert De Niro's, because if a character or an actor can make you hate them, then they've done their job well, especially if that's the purpose of the film. Because I gotta say, I hated Robert De Niro's character and he was a piece of shit. But one thing that also stood out to me was Leonardo DiCaprio, because him being such a big star, you do expect his performance to kind of like be the grandiose sometimes. He was a very exuberant character or just excited character in Django Unchained, or even Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He was he had a lot of character, a lot of personality. But in this movie, he doesn't necessarily take a back seat, but he does play his role based on who he's talking to and everything like that. And that's one thing I could really appreciate from him, because sometimes when an actor is in the film, they want to maybe do too much and they want to steal the scene, or they think, oh, if I'm crying in a scene, I'm going to cry like hard. I'm going to take it to a new level. But sometimes I can command too much attention and stand out, and it's not as natural or organic as you would want it to be. But one thing that I noticed watching this movie is that Leonardo DiCaprio plays his role to perfection. He doesn't do too much, he's not doing too little. He just does exactly what his character is supposed to do in the movie. And that's something I really love, because it allowed other people to shine just as much. And I gotta say, probably my favorite performance in this whole film was Lily Gladstone. She made me empathize with her character so much. Through the whole film, I was just on her side, and I felt so much remorse and sympathy for everything that she was going through. Every time a murder happened or tragedy struck, I was just like kind of seething, and every time she was mad, I felt mad. Every time she was sad, I felt sad. And her performance just came off as so subtle, but at the same time, it was very captivating. And I really loved that from Lily Gladstone. Now, when it comes to the plot, or not the plot, let me change that. When it comes to how the story is told, I think it was done as the main pro of this movie is that it was done so organically, meaning that it's not immediately jumping into the murders and telling you, oh yeah, this is a murder mystery and we're gonna find out who it is and we're gonna portray the murderers as being very sinister. It doesn't do that. It takes you first into this world and establishes relationships, social statuses, everything that you need to know so that when the murders happen, you're not overly alienating even the murderers, which I'm not saying that would be a bad thing. I'm just saying that the murders happen organically, as in you understand the time period because they spent so much time letting you live in it. They spend like the first 30 minutes to an hour just letting you see the family. They do mention the murders and you do see one or two, but you really get to live in this time period. And there's a lot of things that make me so anxious about that because, for one, living in a lawless area like it was in the 1920s where it's so easy to get away with murder, I just can't imagine living in that time period where if you're shot and dead, the chances of you, the person getting caught who killed you, is almost slim to none because, it's basically all word of mouth at the end of the day. There's no cameras. I don't think there are even fingerprints. Like, they didn't mention anything like that. I could look that up later, but they're not doing DNA tracking, nothing like that. They have to go by word of mouth. And that was the toughest thing about watching this, is knowing that the victims who were going through what they were going through and having the people around them being murdered, you feel this type of anxiety because you're thinking, how are they going to get caught? And even if they do, as long as they just deny everything, they could sort of maintain a certain level of innocence to the people around them. And that does happen to a certain extent where they have a lot of people on their side and the level of innocence that they maintain is frustrating, obviously. But that's one thing that I loved about the film, is that they let you live in it and you really connect with the victims of these horrible crimes. And I gotta say that the film is very long, and so if you are a casual moviegoer, I'm not sure that you would watch this movie more than once. I don't think it would be, if you're very casual, I don't think this would be something you're into. You would enjoy it because it is a true story. There's a certain level of interest that comes into it. But besides that, if you're a casual movie watcher, I wouldn't expect you to watch it more than once. However, if you're someone who takes a lot more seriously and you love diving into just an artistic plethora of performance, shots, and directing, then I'd highly recommend this movie. So I just gotta say that if there was one thing I didn't like about this movie, it'd have to be the absence of, I guess, creativity. Not that it demands it or there's many spots for it, but there just wasn't really that many scenes where I thought, oh, that was very creative the way they did that, or that was, I love the camera work in that. There was plenty of gorgeous shots, but there just wasn't too many creative choices that really left an impression. And so it's not a bad thing because it's not like this film calls for it, but at the same time, when I'm leaving the theater, there's just a very neutral feeling I have because there wasn't much that brought an emotion out of me when it came to the shots and directing. Even though Martin Scorsese is obviously masterful and did this movie perfection, it just wasn't enough for me personally to bring something out of me. There were some scenes though between characters that when they finally happen, they obviously bring an emotion out of you because of the performances and where the story was brought to, because like there's an interrogation scene and when it's happening, you completely feel the weight of it finally happening because you journeyed with the characters all the way to this point, and when you finally get to the investigation, when the FBI shows up, it's like I finally get to see this happen, and I'm so glad that it's happening because, like I said before, you get to sympathize with the characters, especially Lily Gladstone, so much that you're almost seething with this sort of like rage because you get this feeling of helplessness, because that's kind of like the main theme of this movie, are corrupt people who have a lot of power and they impose that power on people who can't do anything about it. And that's the thing. That's the main thing that was probably the most heart-wrenching part of this. It was that how helpless the Native Americans were in this story and in real life and when it happened. You just can't help but sympathize with them because there's just nothing you can do. And even if you were there and even if you knew about it, there's just not much you can do because the people who are doing it are the people who are in power. And those type of stories are some of the most frustrating ones, but they're also some of the most satisfying ones when the culprits finally get caught and stripped of their power. And that's one of my favorite parts of the film because they did that very, very well. One part I really liked about the film too was that, I'm not going to say who, but one of the antagonists of the film, they blatantly call out that it doesn't matter even if they do catch us because they're going to forget. And when he said that line, I felt that that really resonated with me because it's true. I mean, even though people are watching this movie, when they leave the theater, most of them are going to forget. And he says because they don't care. And it's true. Because even though the crime was solved, it's not even like it was brought up. It took a movie by one of the most renowned directors ever who was bringing it to the spotlight, who has to bring it to the spotlight for people to be even more aware about it. And even then, some people just aren't going to care. And I just think that's tragic that something like that can happen and it kind of just almost be swept under the rug. Even though the killers were caught and sentenced, it just has this sour taste that it was almost like a formality to send him in jail because at the end of the day, he was released. The main orchestrator got to live a long and healthy life out of prison as well until the age of 87, I think. And it's just tragic. It's just so tragic. And also, in terms of Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Lily Gladstone's character, their love with each other, I gotta say, was very effective. Their chemistry was spot on because when things started to happen, I just started feeling frustrated for them, almost like I knew them because their relationship was in front of me and felt so organic that when things start happening and it starts affecting their marriage, if it frustrates me, it makes me happy, it makes me sad, like it just brings these emotions, the emotions it wanted to bring out of me, brought it out of me. And I thought they did that very well, and I give all credit to Lily Gladstone and Leonardo DiCaprio. They made you really care for their relationship because of their chemistry on camera. So I'm going to talk about spoilers now. And if you don't want anything spoiled for this movie, I recommend skipping to this time code to see my rating and my final thoughts. So now I'm going to talk about spoilers and you've been warned. So when Leonardo DiCaprio's character, the whole time when I saw the trailers, I was curious, like, is he the one committing the murders or is he the one who wants to finally put a stop to it? And because he sees, like, he marries into the family because it showed that in the trailers that was his wife. And so I was thinking, oh, is he going to marry into the family? And then he sees that those murders are going down and he wants to help and be that outside help that they need, because the government's not going to do anything and it's done by other people in power. But I was completely wrong. Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a pretty big piece of shit, as well as Robert De Niro's. And they left that open in the beginning too, which I really liked, because then when it finally had a shot where it confirmed 100% that Leonardo DiCaprio was in on it, because they left it very vague, which was a smart choice because it kept you interested in seeing his, you were watching his footsteps, trying to see what he was doing and how much does he know, how involved is he. And then when it finally shows the extent of his involvement, it pissed me off so much. I was like, I just felt so bad for this woman, and it was just so heartbreaking seeing that these tragedies aren't just happening to your close family, but the closest person to you, your husband, is the one involved in it and is making you sick and poisoning you and orchestrating murders of your siblings. It's just something that I couldn't imagine ever going through, and it just left this seething type of anger that I wanted her to survive, because throughout the film she's very sick and you don't know if she's gonna live or die. And I was just praying, like not praying, but I was like clenching my fist, like please hold on, because you need to see that it was your husband, that piece of shit, who was doing all this stuff behind the scenes and trying to play the good guy and act like he doesn't know what's going on. But yeah, and so you finally do get that resolve. But when you get that resolve when he's caught, my I was so confused, because she, even though he was caught and being arrested, she was still showing affection to him. And even when she started getting better because she stopped taking the insulin that he was giving her, I she still showed him affection, and almost like they were still in love. And I was confused, like, do you not know or realize what's going on, that this man is poisoning you and he was involved in orchestrating the murder of your siblings and so many other people? And when she finally confronted him about it, that scene with Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, I absolutely loved, because it was as satisfying as I wanted it to be. It was like he was trapped in a corner, and he confessed to everything. He confessed to all the crimes, to all of that. But then she finally asked him, what was in the insulin that you were giving me? And when she asked him that, before that he was going on about how his soul is clean, and he's not telling any more lies. And when she confronts him about that, he starts to detract. And that's when you start to realize his character isn't as redeemable as he's making himself out to be. He almost kind of fools you, because you feel proud that he finally admitted to everything, but then he really, puts his foot down into who he really was, that character, by refusing to admit that he was poisoning his wife. And when she confronts him about it, he doesn't say anything. He says, no, 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 no. Yeah. I mean, his face told her, so she knew, but he couldn't even admit it to her face, which I thought was just so heartbreaking, because when you see them fall in love with each other, you know that he does love her. And it's such a conflicting romance, because even though he's such a piece of shit and committing all this stuff on the side, you do believe him, and that his love for her is true. Because anytime he's supposed to direct this plan to obtain the wealth towards his wife, you see how hesitant he is, and how he's being manipulated by his uncle to do these things. And he doesn't really want to do it to his wife. He'll do it to anyone else, but when it comes to his wife, he truly loved her. And it just felt so heartbreaking that it had to go down the way it went down, because you're really wishing that all he had to do was separate himself from the situation, and he could have been on her side, and he could have raised his kids. He could have had a happy, healthy wife. But unfortunately, that character still stood his ground and refused to admit his wrongdoing. And yeah, it was just very heartbreaking, because of how connected you feel with their relationship. So when it comes to my rating for this film, I loved it a lot. Performances were top notch, beautiful cinematography and directing. And this is a very riveting story that I think a lot of people need to be aware of. And I love the fact that this story was made in the first place, this movie was made in the first place, because it sheds a spotlight on some of the history that a lot of people in America don't like shining a spotlight on, which is something that I think the culture in America has been working against. And we've been slowly getting over that, and slowly bringing more of our true history to light. So Martin Scorsese being able to add to that in a very, very well done way. He just did it in an excellent manner. I just feel that's kind of like the silver lining in it all, if any, that at least this story is being brought to the spotlight finally, even if it is almost 100 years later. At least their story will be told in the proper and true way, instead of from the villain's side, because they usually do say that history is written by the winners. And this could have been swept under the rug, and we could have never known about this. But thanks to the FBI at the time that was made, we now know what really happened and a lot of the tragedy that was brought upon the Native Americans. Also, Jesse Plemons, he did a great job, and not too much to his character, but he did perform it perfectly. Like, there's nothing more or less he needed to do, because when he finally shows up in the scenes, you feel this like, oh, like, thank God there's somebody here who isn't corrupt, who can put a stop to this. And it's like a breath of fresh air, because you almost feel suffocated by the amount of corruptness that's in this town, because everybody's bought off. The doctors, the fucking sheriffs, the coroners, everybody is bought off by Robert De Niro's character. And when somebody from the outside finally shows up, it's very satisfying. So for my rating for this movie, I'd have to give it about an 8.5. So I enjoyed it thoroughly. I don't think this movie needs to do anything more, anything less. It just didn't leave me with an incredible impression. Even though I was very deeply moved by the story and the performances, I just wasn't moved as much as I thought I would be. And so that's why I'd have to give this film an 8.5 out of 10. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.